Ed O'Neill, the famous star of Married with Children, has now spoken out and told the truth about what really happened on behind the scenes of the legendary comedy. For years, fans have wondered about the cast's relationships off-screen, the rumored fights, and the great moments that never made it to air. Now, Ed is revealing things that will shock spectators. What really happened on set? The answer is more shocking, dramatic, and fun than anyone could have guessed. Ed O'Neill finally tells the truth about what happened on the set of Married with Children. For years, many in Hollywood whispered about the tension that was building behind the filthy jokes and crazy behavior of Married with Children. The Bundy family lived on instability on screen, exchanging insults and embracing dysfunction like no other sitcom before it. But off-screen, one fight looked to have the same stormy force. This time, though, it wasn't planned. As Al Bundy, Ed O'Neill was the face of the show. He has now given a hint about what really happened. And his confession sheds insight on a divide that fans had only suspected about for decades. Not all of the cast members were at conflict with each other. Most people say that O'Neill got along well with his TV family. Katie Sagal, Christina Applegate, and David Faustino have all talked about how quickly they got along. Sagal even remembered that the show tested out several actors as the Bundy kids throughout the pilot phase. But there was no spark. It didn't come to life until Applegate and Faustino stepped in, shortly before the program officially started in the spring. From then on, the four of them formed a strong friendship that lasted for the whole 11-season duration of the show, which ended in 1997. But the chemistry between the Bundys was strong, whereas the relationship between O'Neill and Amanda Bears, who played their sharp-tongued neighbor Marcy, was not. O'Neill says that the anger didn't start with a single big event, but grew over time. They just didn't get along. His rough, no-nonsense way of running the set rubbed Bersa the wrong way, as she became more outspoken. In the end, the stress escalated to a fight in the makeup room, when both of them yelled insults at each other until O'Neill lost it and threatened to use his fame to get her off the program. He has since said that he wishes he hadn't used his position to get what he wanted, but he never said he was sorry for not like her in general. For him, the anger was real, not only because he had to shoot for a long time. The gap grew much bigger when Bers decided to get married while the show was still on. She invited almost everyone on the cast and crew to her wedding, save for O'Neill and Faustino. When asked, she is said to have informed O'Neill that she was afraid he would laugh. As she and her wife came down the aisle in tuxedos that matched, O'Neill promised he wouldn't. Even though he tried to reassure her with a smirk, he couldn't fully hide it. It was very evident how broken their relationship had gotten when Burr wasn't there. The question of whether O'Neill's behavior meant something more added to the suspicion. Was he bothered by Burr's sexual orientation? At the time, she was becoming more open about being a lesbian, and O'Neill himself said that this change made their relationship difficult. For critics, the irony couldn't be more obvious. Years later, he would come back to TV as Jay Pritchett on Modern Household, the head of a household that included an openly homosexual couple at its center. O'Neill became a revered figure to a new generation of viewers because of a role that promoted inclusivity. Even though there was a fight, the rest of the Bundy cast continued to do well with him. The family on the show kept close, and their friendship lasted long after the show ended. Bers, on the other hand, stayed on the outside. And now that there are rumors of an animated relaunch of Married with Children, viewers are questioning. Is this long-standing tension finally over, or is the old fight still going on? But before we get into more of what O'Neill ultimately verified, let's take a step back and look at how this breakthrough series came to be. From steel mills to the spotlight, Ed O'Neill's life. Before Ed O'Neill became Al Bundy, the angry shoe salesman who made people laugh, his life was completely different. He was born on April 12, 1946, in Youngstown, Ohio, to a working-class Irish Catholic family that came to America in the mid-1800s. Youngstown's steel mills and building projects were a big part of his life from a young age. And by the time he was 14, Ed was already swapping textbooks for hard work. He worked in construction and then shifts at a steel mill. That early toughness would stay with him for the rest of his life, even when he went from sports to the stage. His first love was football. O'Neill made a name for himself on the pitch at Ursuline High School, and his hard work got him a scholarship to Ohio University. But life at the university wasn't what he thought it would be. He studied history, joined Delta Tau Delta, and got really involved in school life. But eventually his passion of sports and parties overwhelmed his dedication to school. After fighting with his coach and getting bad grades, O'Neal left after his sophomore year. He had previously learnt that his strong-willed disposition might cause problems with authority. He was determined not to give up, so he moved to Youngstown State University, where he played football again and joined another fraternity, Delta Sigma Phi. He played against skilled opponents on the field, like Roger Staubach, a budding star, but his future wasn't going to be etched in touchdowns. Something else was silently moving inside him. Football was still a part of his life, but the theater department at Youngstown started to interest him and draw him to a whole other stage. O'Neal was looking for positions that required more than just physical muscle by the time he departed the gridiron. He got his big break when he played a boxer on Broadway. This role combined his athletic experience with his increasing acting skills. That part turned out to be really important. William Friedkin, a well-known director, just happened to observe him and offered O'Neal a minor part in the movie Cruising with Al Pacino. It was only a short appearance, but it was the first sign that Hollywood doors were starting to open. He got more roles, which helped him get better at his craft. He played NYPD detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle in the TV movie Popeye Doyle and was in the popular crime drama The Equalizer. It was impossible to follow Gene Hackman's famous role in The French Connection, but O'Neal's performance showed that he could easily handle difficult, nasty characters. People in the audience might not have known it at the time, but he was progressively gaining the experience that would one day lead him the chance of a lifetime. That's where the narrative gets really interesting. Every step he took, from steel factories to football fields to Broadway stages to crime thrillers, appeared to bring him closer to the role that would define his career. The next question is, how did he get the role in Married with Children? Stay with us to find out. The birth of the Bundys, breaking all the rules. A totally different kind of show was already starting to take shape when Ed O'Neal started to get closer to becoming a TV star. Michael G. Moy and Ron Levitt, the writers of the sitcom, didn't want to be like the polished, picture-perfect family that ruled primetime. People were used to the good lessons from shows like The Cosby Show, where every episode ended with warmth and wisdom. But Moy and Levitt were set on burning the formula. Their idea, which they first called Not the Cosbys as a joke, would go right into disarray. It would make fun of the problems of a struggling, lower-middle-class family in a way that was crass, unrepentant, and cutting enough to make people laugh and squirm at the same time. Timing was what made their vision come true. In the late 1980s, Fox was still a new network that wanted to differentiate out from ABC, NBC, and CBS. Fox saw opportunity where the big players saw peril. Instead of keeping the authors in check, management pushed them to go even further, using innuendo, sarcasm, and circumstances that no other network would dare show. That bravery made room for the Bundys, a family like no other, to enter into American homes. It was really important to cast this strange family. Dozens of actors had tried out for the part of Al Bundy, the angry shoe salesman who always had something to complain about. But when Ed O'Neal walked into the room in 1986, fell into a chair, and let out a defeated sigh, which he had borrowed from a relative, the authors froze. That one sigh summed up everything they thought Al would be: tired, defiant, and just funny enough to make sorrow funny. They didn't need to see anything else. At that moment, O'Neal turned into Al Bundy. The next problem was Peggy Bundy, Al's flashy but indolent wife. Katie Sagal didn't just walk into her audition. She came in like a storm, wearing a tight, flashy clothing and hair that was bright red. She got Peggy right away. The woman who teased, nagged, and seduced in equal measure while refusing to do anything around the house. Sagal later said that she felt the character's rebellious energy from the start, and that fire made Peggy an icon. But the youngsters were harder to deal with. Tina Caspary, who played Kelly Bundy in the first movie, filmed the pilot but never got along with the other actors. Fox could tell there wasn't any chemistry and took a chance, bringing in Christina Applegate, who was 15 years old. The role changed when she came. Christina's combination of innocence and sly humor made Kelly both silly and somehow real, a girl that the audience couldn't help but laugh at. Later, she remembered how fast she felt at home on set and how easily she picked up on the sardonic mood. Bud Bundy also had to change actors. Hunter Carson was the first choice, but the chemistry didn't work out again. Then David Faustino, who was 12 at the time, tried out, and everything fell into place. He was concerned about reading scripts full of adult jokes, but his ability to accept Bud's clumsy, ambitious, always scheming underdog energy gave the program its final piece. The show needed something to balance out the Bundys, and that was the neighbors. Amanda Burris played Marcy Rhodes, who was the straight-laced contrast to A.L.'s cynicism. Her incisive delivery kept things from getting too crazy, and her relationship with O'Neill added another level of comedy. Burr later said that at first, the cast was a little cynical, but within weeks, they were friends for life. Segal remembered that O'Neill made her laugh right away, but Applegate said that the cast members were like a family, both on and off film. The Bundys had an edge because of the instant chemistry between them, not the screenplay. Fox executives were shocked when the pilot eventually arrived. They liked the sharp humor and obvious chemistry, but they said that the supporting characters could use more energy. But they still knew what they had. A show that was more than just funny. It was thought-provoking. It didn't try to hide its rough edges. It told people to be offended. Married with Children became the anti-sitcom and sparked controversies all over the country in just a few episodes. People who didn't like it said it was crass, parents said it was hazardous, and people who did like it couldn't stop watching. Fox has the loudest, most controversial family on TV all of a sudden. As the Bundys took over living rooms, the show quickly went too far for some people. What occurred next transformed TV forever. Don't stop watching. The scandal that made the Bundys impossible to stop. In 1989, Married with Children aired an episode called Her Cups Runneth Over. The plot fit with the show's irreverent approach. Al Bundy and Jefferson walking around in lingerie stores. A plot full of double meanings, sneaky jokes and funny pictures. But underneath all the funny stuff were things that would start a cultural maelstrom. A flamboyant gay figure with a crown, raunchy jokes, and semi-nude sequences that most networks would never have shown. The response came immediately, but no one spoke out more than Terry Ricolta, a Michigan mother of 4 and the sister-in-law of the state's governor. She was so angry that she started what was supposed to be a personal crusade, but it quickly turned into a nationwide boycott effort. Ricolta wrote to big companies to tell them that their advertising money was going to support immoral content that hurt families. Her anger was echoed in headlines all over the country, and within weeks, big-name sponsors like Gillette, Coca-Cola, and Warner Lambert took down their ads. For Fox, who was still new and fighting to stay alive against ABC, CBS, and NBC, the fallout was bad. The network relied largely on ad money, and losing such big-name sponsors felt like a direct danger to its viability. Fox took another episode, I'll See You in Court, off the air in an effort to calm the storm. The story, which was about a couple overhearing sexual activity in a hotel room, was thought to be just too risque for primetime TV. It wouldn't come back up for years, and even then it would be highly modified. There was no break in the pressure during the manufacturing. Later, Ed O'Neill remembered how every sentence and scene suddenly meant something. The stress was high, but I think it made the show better. We have to think of new ways to make them laugh. Katie Segal said that the mood was one of relentless scrutiny, where critics could pick apart even the smallest things. Christina Applegate was only 17 at the time, yet she suddenly found herself in the spotlight in a way she had never expected. She was called a teenage sex symbol almost immediately. This gave her job opportunities but also brought her a lot of unwanted attention that she wasn't ready for. But the irony of the boycott was huge. Instead than killing the show, it made it much better. Before the scandal, Married with Children was ranked 48th in the country. In the years that followed, it consistently made it into the top 50, and sometimes much higher, and stayed there for years. The attempted censoring had the opposite effect, turning the Bundys from a loud comedy family into cultural lightning poles. Television commentators said that Ricolta's campaign was a perfect example of the Streisand effect, which says that trying to hide something only makes it more popular. Fox instantly saw how important the outrage was. The network didn't apologize, instead, they leaned into the incident and turned the show into a sitcom that wasn't suitable for every family. It turned into a sneaky way to market the show and a badge of honor that set the Bundys apart from clean-cut TV families like the Huxtables. People who would not have watched before suddenly wanted to know what all the hoopla was about. Ricolta later said, with some bitterness, that her campaign had unintentionally made Married with Children a household name, even though she still didn't like it. There was no denying the long-term effect. Episodes that were controversial and then shown again on cable or published on DVD were often cut or censored, which upset die-hard fans who thought the Bundys' raw edge was being watered down. But the bad reputation had already done its damage. The show had made a name for itself as a pioneer by showing that TV could do well by talking about things that were off-limits. Success comes at a high price behind the scenes. Tensions that the public never saw were caused by hard schedules, competing egos, and personal problems. As the Bundys yelled on film, the chaos behind the scenes became impossible to ignore. What happened next will shock you. Don't let it pass you by. Shadows behind the laughs. One of the first breaks happened in 1989 when TV Guide put out a special issue about the Married with Children cast. Amanda Barris and David Garrison, who played Marcy and Steve Rhodes, were shocked to see that only Ed O'Neill and Katie Seagal were on the cover. Amanda felt left out since she wasn't included, and Ed chose to stay quiet. Years later, he said that not speaking up was a mistake. I didn't believe it would leave such a lasting mark, but it did. By 1993, the breach between them was worse, and their professional relationship became colder. Amanda didn't invite Ed to her wedding on purpose. She explained why later. That other people might not like him being there. Ed thought it was a personal insult, and he didn't try to hide his anger in further interviews. What started as a professional slight had turned into a permanent separation, but there was more to the story than just stress. In 1991, Katie Seagal, who was pregnant at the time, lost her baby 7 months into the pregnancy. The show's plot already included Peg Bundy's pregnancy, and fans were looking forward to seeing her have a new baby. The writers had to change course quickly after the terrible loss. The anticipated arrival of a Bundy baby was changed to a dream sequence with owls, a strange scene meant to keep Katie from having to relive her anguish. Later, she said it was the hardest time of her life, but her co-workers helped her get through it. People discreetly gathered around her. The effort to bridge that gap the next year simply made things worse. In 1992, authors added a new character named Seven, who was Peggy's little nephew, in the hopes of making the plot more interesting. But supporters were angry. Letters came in, making fun of the character for being rude and out of place. Seven left the show after just one season because the response was so strong, with no explanation ever given on screen. It was one of the few creative mistakes the show made, a reminder that the Bundy formula was too cutting and clear to be messed with. The mood was never easy, even on regular filming days. There were more than 3,000 people in the audience for each show, which made sure that the laughing was real but also put a lot of pressure on the cast. The cast had to get their performances right the first time, and they were always being watched. Ed O'Neill did a lot of the physical comedy, like setting up pratfalls, fake fights, and over-the-top antics. Over the years, these left him with a lot of little injuries that Al Bundy masked beneath his grumpy swagger. The emotional burden was even higher for Katie. After her defeat, she had to go back to the set and act like nothing had happened, going back to Peg's sharp-tongued, caustic personality. There was a huge difference between her true anguish and her on-screen humor. It was a balancing act that showed how much the actors gave to keep the show going. But there were times when things were really warm in the middle of the stress. Christina Applegate recalls how, even though production was often chaotic and the family was dysfunctional on television, the ensemble often got along well off camera. Still, the long hours, the pressure of performing in front of a live audience, and the continual public attention caused problems that often turned into fights. The Bundys might have been the craziest family on TV in America, but the actors who played them had to do a lot more than just say their lines to stay on the show. When the controversy got attention, what happened behind the scenes was only part of the narrative. The Bundys were always a hot topic of conversation on film, making people laugh one minute and angry the next. Episodes that pushed American television further than most dared at the time showed the show's sharpest edges. Her Cups Runneth Over aired in 1989. The episode was about Al Bundy's search for a bra that was no longer made. It was supposed to be funny, but instead it sparked protests all throughout the country. There was so much anger that boycott campaigns started, and parents asked Fox to stop airing the show altogether. But, strangely, the uproar just made the ratings go up, making the Bundys seem like cultural rebels who couldn't be touched. This wasn't the last time the show pushed the limitations of TV. Another well-known episode is I'll See You in Court. Was about a couple who found out they had been filmed having sex in a hotel room without their knowledge. Fox put the program on hold for years because they were worried about how people would react to the topic. When it finally came back in the middle of the 1990s, it was already thought to be one of the most censored sitcom episodes of its period. But it wasn't just jokes for adults that got people talking. The show made fun of important issues of the time a lot. The Egg and I made fun of those who care about animal rights, and No Ma'am introduced Al Bundy's men's group, which was established to fight feminism. Some people said the show was sexist, while others said it was a sharp parody of extreme on both sides. Ed O'Neill later said that he always saw No Ma'am as a method to make fun of behavior that was too much, not to support it. The nuance didn't end the argument. And pressure from advocacy groups meant that later airings typically had to delete or modify dialogue to suit tougher TV standards. Even yet, improvisation was very popular on set. Especially for making up phrases on the spot in scenes set in a shoe store or bowling alley. Many of these spontaneous jokes got past the censors and became famous, with fans quoting them decades later as if they had been part of the script all along. The show also used famous guest stars to make it even more irreverent. Sam Kinison was a standout. His crazy energy was a fantastic compliment for the Bundy attitude. His appearance made the numbers skyrocket, showing that the appropriate outsider could make the show's humor even funnier. Still, pushing boundaries had repercussions for the person. Christina Applegate, who played Kelly Bundy, said years later that being forced to wear exposing clothes at just 17 made her feel uneasy and sometimes pushed. Katie Sagal, on the other hand, recalls filming a fall down the stairs over and over until the bruises were genuine. This was a reminder of how much physical demand might be hidden under the laughs. The disputes had become a part of the show's identity by the time it got to its last few episodes. Every protest, every banned program, and every angry letter seemed to make the Bundys the worst troublemakers on TV. The actors wasn't even warned when Fox suddenly canceled the show in 1997 after 11 seasons. When fans in Ohio asked Ed O'Neill if the concert was over, he found out. Christina Applegate found out about it while driving and listening to the radio. There was no goodbye meeting. Bidi Bikia, know your last party. Just quiet. Ed would subsequently sum it up in a few words. We had a lot of fun, and that's what I want to maintain. After the show ended, each member of the Bundy cast went their own way. Ed changed his name to Jay Pritchett in Modern Family in 2009. He won praise and Emmy nominations for playing a very different kind of father. Katie Sagal won a Golden Globe for her performance as Gemma Teller on Sons of Anarchy, which was a big change from her portrayal as Peg. Christina Applegate made a new legacy with Dead to Me, but in 2021 she said she had multiple sclerosis, which changed the course of her career. David Faustino went from acting to voice acting for animated shows, and Amanda Bears did well as a director behind the camera. Subsequently talking about her long-rumored problems with Ed at fan gatherings. It's amazing that Married with Children is still popular even though it ended about 30 years ago. Younger viewers are shocked that there was a sitcom as brazen as the Bundys in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Streaming services like Hulu and Peacock have brought the show to new audiences. People all throughout the world are still watching. Critics say that the show opened the path for The Simpsons, Family Guy, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Katie Siegel said it best when she said, "We broke every mold of the family sitcom. The Bundys weren't perfect, but they were real." But did you know that there was one person who was never meant to be one of the actors on the set of Married with Children? Stay with us. Because what Ed O'Neill ultimately said will shock you. The casting risk that almost never occurred. While the Bundys were making their mark on TV history, the truth was that one of them was never meant to be there in the first place. Ed O'Neill didn't move to Los Angeles to become famous for his sitcom work. He was a theater-trained actor from Youngstown, Ohio, and he established his career on serious roles. He played Lenny in Of Mice and Men on stage in Hartford. His portrayal was full of quiet anguish instead of punchlines. One night, while O'Neill was playing that sad part, a casting director who was visiting the family happened to be in the audience. He wasn't looking for actors for TV, but O'Neill's stillness made a significant impression on him that stayed with him. That same director heard months later that Fox was having trouble finding someone to play the part of a shoe salesman who has been through a lot in a new sitcom. He offered the least likely person, a dramatic stage performer who didn't have any experience with comedy. It sounded crazy at first, but the producers had to listen since they were desperate. By the time the call came, O'Neill was in Los Angeles nursing his wounds from a failed pilot. He had just come from a sweaty handball game at the YMCA and was still lugging his sports bag. He didn't expect much when he walked into the audition. Most of the actors before him had spoken in a Jackie Gleason way. Loud, chaotic, and almost like a cartoon. O'Neill went a different way. He thought about his uncle, who was a judge and dealt with life's misfortunes with calm acceptance. His uncle would sigh and ask, "What's for dinner?" if the dog got hit by a car. O'Neill read Al Bundy in the same way. As a man who wasn't angry but rather defeated, resigned to a life that would never get better. Ron Levitt and Michael Moy, the producers, burst out laughing. They didn't see Al Bundy as a clown for the first time, they saw him as a man whose anger made him amusing. They knew right away that they had uncovered their lead, but the Fox execs only saw risk. One of Rupert Murdoch's most trusted individuals, Barry Diller, thought casting O'Neill was crazy. He thought Katie Sagal was the best choice for Peggy Bundy because she had already been chosen. Diller told them straight out that they could do a lot better for Ed. He thought that putting millions on an unknown performer was a tragedy waiting to happen. The producers wouldn't give in. They said that O'Neill's acting gave the character something real and unique. Diller's answer was caustic. "Your funeral." A lot of people would have thought that was a command to fire O'Neill. The producers saw that as permission to keep him, even though they didn't want to. Diller cut the order for the show in response. Fox would only pay for one episode instead of 12, which would be a very expensive test run. If the pilot didn't work, the show would be canceled without a ceremony, and O'Neill would go back to being unknown. It was even worse because O'Neill didn't know what was going on. He taped that first episode without knowing that some of the most influential guys in television were betting against him. Everyone else on set could feel the tension. Years later, after Married with Children had been aired for 11 seasons and made O'Neill a household name, fate brought him back together with Barry Diller. O'Neill had already starred in pictures like Dutch by then, so Fox was no longer afraid of him. Diller said, almost without thinking, "I was wrong about you." O'Neill, who never likes to brag, just said, "We all make them." That calm conversation hid how close it all came to never happening. Ed O'Neill was never supposed to play the tired, sardonic Al Bundy, but that part made him famous. But what do you think? Was Ed O'Neill truly the wrong person to play Al Bundy, or was he the secret weapon that saved Married with Children? We want to know what you think. Remember to sign up.